I'm going to, there we go. And just a few housekeeping reminders. Please keep yourself muted if you are not talking. If you would like to ask a question, feel free to either put it in the chat and I will monitor that and let Jim know when there's a question. Or also you can go down to the bottom at the reactions tab and raise your hand. And I will also monitor that and call on you when you have a question. Also, please remember that if you have ideas for these webinars or suggestions for speakers, please don't hesitate to contact me and let me know. We're always looking for new ideas and new people who can present these webinars. So feel free to give your feedback and share your ideas. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Jim and let him give an introduction and enjoy the webinar. There you go, Jim. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time today.
Happy to be here, Angie. Thank you very much. So
bet.
good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you're zooming in from. My name is Jim Versweyveld. I am part of the UW-Madison Division of Extension's Farm Management Team. A little bit about the Farm Management Team. So there are 5 of us. My colleague, Katie, focuses on farm financials and taxation. My colleague, Joy, does farm succession and estate planning. Leonard does markets and policy. My colleague, Steph, is in charge of strategic planning and entrepreneurship, business startups, things like that. And my focus is on HR and safety. So today's presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about farm workplace culture. Why does it matter? And talk a little bit about a course that's available to you that I hope sounds interesting as far as building an improved workplace culture. My background, I grew up on a dairy farm in upstate New York, went to Cornell University to study animal science, got my master's degree in occupational safety at UW-Whitewater here in Wisconsin. And I've been with Extension since 2018, focused primarily on labor related issues. So when we talk about workplace culture, we have to start really with the foundation, and the foundation is trust. Trust is something that we know it when we see it, but it's kind of hard to describe. Trust is something that is a feeling and may be sometimes challenging to identify. Trust is basically confidence that you can depend on another person. And in the workplace, from a manager's perspective, trust is about knowing that when you're not there, things are still happening. Things are getting done as they should without you directly supervising that. So with trust, we know that it takes time. Trust is not something that you can just snap your fingers and all of a sudden you've established trust in the workplace. It's something that's built over a period of time. It is good for your operations. Sometimes it's hard to tie these HR topics directly to the financial performance and productivity of your farm, but there is a direct connection, and hopefully I'll make that connection clear to you. Trust can be lost very quickly. Things that you say, things that you do, actions that you take, and trust can be lost. And most importantly, actions speak louder than words. It's more about what you do than what you say as far as building trust on your farm. So what are some of the causes of low trust in a workplace? Struggles, trust issues. What are some of the things that are taking place there? Well, one is a lack of inclusion. When people don't feel part of things, they don't feel like their contribution matters. They don't feel that their opinions or their ideas can be openly shared. This can be sometimes especially challenging in family businesses. And many of our farms obviously are family businesses. And the reason for that is, unlike a lot of small businesses, we see on farms that many times decisions are made, important strategic decisions about the farm are made at the dinner table. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the way families operate. But just remember that when you're doing that, your employees are not at the dinner table. So they're being left out of that process. Another factor is not truly listening, where you maybe go through the motions, some head nods, but not really engaging with employees and listening to their ideas and letting them share their ideas and encouraging them to share ideas with you. Feeling like you don't matter, or your ideas aren't heard or mattered. Worker perceptions of vulnerability is something that we see on our farm. In many cases, not always, but on many cases on our farms, some of the employees may be foreign born. They may be immigrants from other parts of the world. There may be social pressures on those groups that make them feel more vulnerable. There can be language barriers, and language barriers are a huge part of this, because if you have, for example, an employee who only speaks Spanish and doesn't speak English, there is a perception that they can't communicate with you, or communication is difficult, or communication has to take place through a third party, through someone else translating what they're saying. So that can certainly damage trust. Sometimes we see, particularly on larger farms, no real relationship with the boss. So if you're working on a big dairy farm, for example, say you're a third shift milker, do you even see the boss? Do you even know who the boss is? You may not have an opportunity to really interact with that individual, or to know much about that person and what they value, and kind of why they're in business in the first place. And then lastly, previous experience. Sometimes employees will come to you with a really bad experience from another farm. So they may have trouble trusting leadership, trusting other colleagues. So that's something that, again, will take time. So what can destroy trust? What are some things that managers do, either intentionally or unintentionally, that destroy trust in the workplace? A lot of different things: not listening, double talk, keeping secrets, not taking responsibility, snoopervise, where you're really kind of questioning whether people are doing the right thing, breaking promises. There's a variety of things that can destroy trust. And that leads us into this connection with workplace culture. So what does trust have to do with culture? What we see in the culture of a low trust environment, so we'll start here on the left-hand side of your screen. In a low trust environment, we have employees that are suspicious of others' motives. They're the feeling of having to watch your back all the time, assuming the worst about people, assuming that their intentions are negative. And that's what we see sometimes in low trust environments, which then of course leads to low morale, poor relationships, people not getting along, potential conflict. But then on the flip side of that, on the right-hand side of this screen, a willingness to understand. In a high trust environment, you're willing to listen, to hear people out, hear what they have to say, give them the benefit of the doubt, assume that their intentions are positive instead of negative, which then of course leads to better morale, good morale, people are getting along, and positive relationships develop. So your farm culture is something that is kind of a mix of values, what you as a leadership team, you as a farm manager value about the operation, your attitudes about other people, attitudes about your workers, where their background, their ethnicity, their nationality, various things that you can have attitudes about your workforce, your beliefs, your personal beliefs about the future of your farm, the level of involvement that you expect from your family members, from your employees, and then customs. So it's kind of a blend of things that ultimately become your farm culture. So it's all about the work atmosphere. If you want to think of it this way, your workplace culture on your farm is kind of like your farm's personality. So if you were meeting your farm, imagine your farm as a person. If you were meeting your farm for the first time, what would that personality feel like? Would it be warm and friendly? Would it be more formal? Would it be kind of standoffish and maybe not open to others' ideas or input? And it's that, again, that combination of the mission, the vision, the values of the farm, and it's expressed and lived by the owners and the managers. And that would include all managers, not just the senior most leadership team, but if you have team leads or supervisors or other people in various positions of leadership, that reflects directly on the farm culture, whether you intend that to be the culture or not. So you could have, for example, a maintenance supervisor on your farm that was challenging, difficult to work with. Maybe people kind of tiptoe around this individual because they don't want to upset him or her. That reflects directly on you, and that becomes part of the culture, the experience that employees are having, even if it's not the behaviors that you're necessarily portraying to your workers. So why does culture matter? Why do we care about farm culture? Sometimes when I talk to farm managers, they're like, oh, this HR stuff, it's all touchy-feely stuff, and I want to talk bottom line. Well, it does tie to the bottom line. They're often hidden costs, so they're a little bit more difficult to track. But there's things like productivity, retention. Do you have a revolving door of employees with people constantly coming and going and nobody's sticking around for very long? Job satisfaction, profitability, recruiting, your ability to fill open positions when you have an opening. All of that reflects productivity, which ultimately reflects the financial performance of your farm. Every farm has a culture. It's built over time. It's the hows and the whys of the everyday operation. I remember a conversation I had with a farm manager, and I asked him about his farm culture. And he said, oh, we don't do that stuff here. And I kind of chuckled to myself because, yes, you do actually. It may not be intentional. You may not intend to have the culture that you have, but there's a culture there, and your employees are definitely feeling it on a day-to-day basis. So a significant portion of what I'm talking about when I refer to farm culture is communication, how communication takes place, how people are talked to, how they talk to each other, how they treat each other, how management treats the employees. And it's all part of the feel, if you will, of what it's like to work on your farm. And our focus today is a lot about employees, but it's really beyond employees. It's family members that may be working on your farm, either full-time or casually or part-time or in whatever capacity. It can be service personnel. It could be your vet, your nutritionist, a variety of different people, salespeople that interact with your farm on a daily basis, any consultants that you use, or even visitors. If you host a FFA event at your farm, people are feeling your farm culture, even if they're just casual visitors from the community. Before I go on with kind of continuing this as to why this matters, I just want to stop quickly. And Angie, are there any questions that have come into the chat, or does anybody want to share questions at this point?
No questions so far, but if anybody has one, feel free. Jim has agreed that if you have questions, just feel free to ask them at any point. Either raise your hand or type it in the chat and we'll get you an answer.
Sure, please. Yeah, let's make it interactive. I'm happy to stop with any questions that you have. But one of the reasons that farm culture matters is there is a growing worker shortage. It's affecting many, many businesses, not just farms, but it is affecting farms very directly. We know that the nation's workforce is approaching full employment with an unemployment rate, and this is national, about 3.5%. 3.5% unemployment means that the vast majority of people who want to be working are already working. They have a job. So you, as a manager, when you have vacancies, are forced to convince them to join from some other place of employment in many cases, to switch employment to you versus someone who is unemployed and not seeking work. So it does vary by state. Here in Wisconsin, it's actually a little lower than that. It's at 3.2, but 3.5% unemployment is very, very low, and farms are definitely feeling the effect of that. The national labor participation rate is at 62.6%, and that's a statistic from the Bureau of Labor Statistics as of March. And it may be a statistic that you're not familiar with, so I'll just explain a little bit about what that means. The labor participation rate is the percent of the population age 16 and above that are either working actively or wanting to be working actively. So they're either job seekers or they're gainfully employed. 62.6%. So that means that the balance, the rest, are either students who maybe are full-time in school and not really seeking employment of any type. They could be retired people who maybe aren't working or only working in a very casual setting. It could be people who are focused on raising young children and are not really seeking employment like that. So the reason I share this statistic is it's often lower than people realize. So the group of available workers out there is actually smaller than many people realize, and in this case, 62.6. We know that agriculture has an image problem. It's something that we see pretty much universally across the nation, where potential workers may be attracted to alternate sectors. And what I mean by alternate sectors is other industries that they perceive as a better place to work than they might seek out farm work. And why is that? I think, we in the agriculture sector could and should do a better job of promoting why people would want to work on a farm. I think we struggle with that. I call the perception the 3Ds: dull, dirty, and dangerous, and whether it's fair or unfair, it is a perception that many people have about agriculture. And it's something that we need to address head on to encourage people to, instead of working at, that Dollar General warehouse down the road, come and work on my farm instead. Well, here's why farm work might be appealing to you. We also know that there's less availability of migrant agricultural workers. The agricultural industry, dairy in particular, has relied on migrant workers for many, many decades. It's been a significant portion of our workforce, with upwards of 60% of the workforce as migrant labor. That population is less available than it used to be. Many dairy farmers that I've worked with have said, potential workers used to just show up in their driveway. Do you have anything for me to do? Do you have any work? And that's less and less common nowadays. And there's a variety of reasons. COVID did bad things for migrant agriculture workers from around the world because, it's just more difficult to travel easily from other parts of the world during the pandemic years that we hopefully have behind us now. The other thing too is the H-2A worker visas that workers seek to work in the ag industry are really, really complicated, and there's a lot of bureaucracy. Some farms just kind of throw up their hands and say, you know, this is just so complex. I don't want to have to hire an attorney in order just to have some employees here. So I'll just avoid, you know, the H-2A population completely. So anyway, for a variety of reasons, that population is less available than it used to be. And then another trend, and this is a trend that we've seen really for the last couple decades, is that the rural workforce is decreasing due both to an aging population. So we see the baby boomers retiring at record rates, leaving the workforce, where there's a trend of rural young people to leave those rural communities for opportunities in bigger towns and bigger cities. So that's kind of a disturbing trend. It certainly affects farms very directly, as farms depend on that rural workforce for their futures. I mentioned COVID, and hopefully, as I said, you know, the worst of it is behind us, but we are seeing a lag in the workforce that I think is due directly to the impact of COVID-19. Few things that I want to mention here. So one of them is what I call pandemic-inspired job changes. So I think for many people, the pandemic gave people an opportunity to hit the pause button on their career and rethink, is this really what I want to be doing? You know, I think it gave people, as businesses shut down in various sectors of industry, it gave people a chance to kind of catch their breath and say, you know, what do I really want to be doing long term? So there were lots and lots of job changes during that period. There was a huge upheaval in childcare. Schools were closed, daycares were closed. People had difficulty with their traditional daycare, childcare providers and being open and being available. So that affected the workforce very directly. And some of these labor challenges are improving, but some of them I think are long lasting and will probably continue to plague the industries as well. I wanted to share this chart on the right hand side just real quickly, because I think it's an interesting chart, but basically it shows which industries were hit the hardest during the coronavirus outbreak. So if you think of the various industry sectors, which ones were hit the hardest? And you can see that it's food and drink, retail, travel and tourism. It's kind of those hospitality type industries that were hit the hardest. So this displaced a whole mess of workers. But unfortunately for agriculture, hospitality workers don't, at least historically, translate all that well to farm labor. And the industries that do, like construction and transportation, that make great farm workers, they actually kept very busy during the pandemic and weren't really impacted as directly. Another factor is employee turnover. So employee turnover on our farms is much higher than other industry benchmarks. So if you look at other industries, they see lower turnover than farms do. And turnover is just simply people starting and then quitting, starting and then quitting. Just revolving door of employees that come and go from the workplace. Turnover is expensive. The Society for HR Management estimates that the average cost per a new hire is $4,000, and that's training costs, but also lost productivity when you have a vacancy. Because when you have a vacancy on your farm, somebody is doing that work. Somebody is picking up the slack, whether it's you as a manager or other employees, or if you're forced to pay overtime or whatever, there's all costs related to that when you have a vacancy. So turnover is something that's expensive. And part of what we see on farms is not having effective HR practices in place. And what I mean by effective HR practices are things like job descriptions, job postings, having a battery of interview questions that you can ask when you are doing an interview. They can be things like an org chart, an organizational chart that explains the structure of your farm, who reports to who. And then simple things like staff meetings. Some farms have staff meetings, but many do not. We also see performance reviews on farms as being kind of hit or miss. Some farms are very good about providing employee feedback, but other farms, performance evaluations of employees are rare, if ever, occurring. And so those are some of the things that can lead to a bad experience potentially for an employee and resulting in turnover. So there's a business case for culture, and hopefully I've established that, but becoming a successful workplace culture is a significant way to differentiate yourself from other employers, whether those other employees are other farms in your community, in your county, in your region, or whether they're the Dollar General warehouse on the other side of town. You're competing for the available talent with those other places. I don't have a national statistic on this, but I can tell you that in Wisconsin, there are 1.7 job openings for every available worker. So workers can be choosy. Workers can pick and choose where they decide to go because there's more openings than there are available employees. And that is a trend that we see nationwide. So that's a reason for focusing on workplace culture. It's a way to attract talent. It's also a way to motivate people, make them feel engaged and part of things, and make them feel like they matter, which we know can directly improve retention of the employees that you have. And then, as I mentioned earlier, your farm has a culture. Whether it's the culture you intend or not, there's one there. So rather than leave it to random chance, be intentional about your culture and build the type of culture that you want to build, so that when you do have vacancies, when you do have openings, that your farm becomes a place that people want to go to and want to work at. Another result of a good workplace culture, when you have a positive workplace culture, something that develops on your farm is what we call psychological safety. And psychological safety is different than complying with OSHA. If you're going through the motions of OSHA compliance and you're showing, skid steer training videos, that's great. That's fine. But that's not the same as psychological safety. Psychological safety is a feeling. It's a belief that you can come forward with mistakes that you've made, near misses that you've had, questions that you have when you don't understand something, and you'll not be punished or humiliated. So there won't be punitive action for explaining that you're not sure. One of the factors we see on farms is more and more farm employees are coming to farms without a farm background. And I was working with a farm here locally in Wisconsin, and he said during a training for new employees, he said, "I never want to see you step over a moving PTO." And one of the employees said, "What's a PTO?" So these are things that within our agricultural sector, it's so commonplace, it's so part of the fabric of who we are, that sometimes we forget as managers that people without a farm background would really have no way of knowing what a PTO was. So things like that, where it's okay. It's okay to bring things forward to your attention and to raise your hand and say, I don't understand. I don't know what you mean.
I did hear someone speak. Did anybody have a question? Okay.
All right.
Thought
I'll
I'd check.
continue. Okay, so the importance of developing a culture of safety. So along with your workplace culture efforts, this culture of safety will come along, and part of it is you as a leader on the farm championing safety as a critical aspect of the ongoing business. So not just check the box, yes, I showed the skid steer training video, but actually a sincere commitment to having employees leave at the end of the day in the same condition that they arrived in the morning. So it's more than keeping up with OSHA required trainings. It's more about a sincere feeling of wanting people to be safe and to stay safe so that they can at the end of the day return to their families. It's about dedicating sufficient resources to equip the workforce, and that can be resources like personal protective equipment, like gloves and goggles and hard hats and respirators if they're necessary. But it's more about it's not just buying that stuff and having it available, but it's about encouraging people to use it and explaining to them why you want them to be using it. And then for those employees that actually are setting a good example, they are wearing the safety glasses when they're supposed to be wearing safety glasses, that you're calling them out as a positive, and you're encouraging other people who maybe aren't as good about meeting your safety expectations to call out those employees that are doing a great job. And there's various ways you can do that. You can have it employee of the month, or promote safe work practices on your company bulletin board, or on a newsletter if you use a newsletter, or your Facebook page, whatever you do, but kind of developing that culture of safety. So by emphasizing a positive workplace culture, you can have a direct and positive impact on recruiting, your ability to attract other employees. You'll find that when your workplace culture is a positive one, your employees, in some cases, will actually do the recruiting for you. That word of mouth becomes a very positive thing, where they're telling their friends about your farm. They're telling their family members about your farm as a great place to work. And so that challenge that some farms find with recruiting is taken care of for you by employees that are having a great experience on your farm. Retention is the next one. It stops or it slows, at least, that revolving door of employees coming and going from your farm, and having people feel committed to the future of your business, understanding the mission and the vision of your farm, and feeling a part of it, feeling like they want to be in for the long haul and part of that farm's success. Engagement is about not just punching the clock and going through the motions, but actually doing a good job because you care about doing a good job. Not just when the boss is watching, but when, because you feel invested in the future of the farm, you are doing a good job. You're, reporting that calf that's looking a little bit sick, or, you're keeping an eye on heat detection, or whatever factor it is, because you're engaged in the future of that farm versus just putting in your time to get a paycheck. That in turn improves morale. And then, as we talked about, that feeling of psychological safety, that my boss actually cares about me as an individual, that I don't, get hurt on the job. So that brings me to the course that we're offering. So we are offering a course. It's called Becoming the Employer of Choice. And it's about developing those leadership skills that we think can be significant business drivers to attract, retain, and motivate talented employees. And what does it mean to be an employer of choice in your community? It basically means that employees are choosing you. They want to work on your farm because they've heard that positive message. They believe in the farm's mission and vision and future, and they want to be part of things. Farms don't always do a great job of this. And hopefully this course can point out some tools and ways to improve that. Sometimes farmers, just by being farmers, the nature of being a farmer is you are fiercely independent and you do your own thing, and you kind of like aren't interested in how you fit into the community that you're part of. But as that worker shortage becomes more and more of a factor, it will be a huge business driver for farms that are connected to their community. And they can do that in a variety of ways. They could, host a 4-H meeting, or do an open house, or, I know dairy breakfasts on the farm are a huge amount of work, but they actually are a great way to connect with the community and create a positive image of your farm as a potential place to work. So Becoming the Employer of Choice is a course that we offer to farm leaders, and it hopefully answers a variety of questions. But the questions are things like, do you know how employees describe the culture of your farm? So as I mentioned earlier, your farm has a culture. What does it feel like to the employees? And unfortunately, for many farm managers, it's not what they think it is. So, you could talk to a farm manager and say, how's the workplace culture? And they say, oh, it's great. It's really great. And the employees are in the background like, oh, no, it's not. It's your culture is what the employees are experiencing more so than what you necessarily think the culture is like. Part of that is, do you know how to deliver effective feedback, whether it's positive or negative, whether you're scolding or praising an employee, do you know how to give that feedback effectively so that it ends up being a motivating experience for the employee? Do you understand what motivates employees? A lot of managers think it's all about the paycheck. And yes, wages obviously are important, but they're not the only important thing. As far as that whole employee experience, there's many things that managers would be surprised to know that employees actually rank higher than wage, particularly in lower wage jobs where there's many different employers offering that same kind of wage range. So understanding what really motivates people. And then how to manage conflict. Conflict on your farm is inevitable, whether it's conflict between family members, whether it's conflict between you and an employee, whether it's conflict between employees who can't get along for whatever reason. How you manage that kind of puts you under the microscope with the rest of your team. They're watching to see how you handle conflict, and that ultimately becomes part of that whole workplace culture and experience. And then finally, do you have a vision that you can effectively share and engage to your employees? When you do onboarding with an employee, when you start an employee off on your farm, do they understand what the farm is about? Do they understand the vision and the mission of that farm, and why that farm exists, and what its goals are for the long term? Because that's the way to make people feel part of things and make them feel engaged in the whole process. So what is VTech? It's kind of the short name for Employer of Choice. Is a Canvas course. Canvas is a learning management system. It's basically something you access through your computer or your laptop or your phone. It's an online course. It's a 4-week program. And during the weeks, the program is self-directed. So if you find it easier to, do the course in the evening when you're not as busy, you can work on it at night. If you're a morning person and you'd rather tackle the reading and the questions and the, interaction in the morning, that's totally fine too. It's self-paced. So you determine during that week of the program when you work on it. And the time commitment is, we're estimating roughly 90 minutes to 2 hours per week, depending on the extra reading materials that you can choose to read or not to read. But it's basically a couple hours a week, and that would include a weekly facilitated discussion group. So when you sign up for this course, and hopefully we get a group of people from DGA that are interested, that can become a cohort together. You would determine, Thursday mornings work best for us. We'll work, Thursday morning at 9 on our weekly discussion group, or we'd rather do it over the lunch hour. If 11:30 or noon works better for people, the group can decide when those facilitated discussions are happening. And during that facilitated discussion, you're basically sharing out, here's some things I've tried on my farm that work well. When I'm hiring a new person, here's what I do, and kind of sharing out best practices with the rest of the group. So the 4 weeks are broken into 8 lessons. So week 1 is about becoming the employer of choice. And the lessons are specifically what it means to be an employer of choice. What do we mean when we say that? And what are some of the keys towards reaching that status, if you will, within your community? Week 2 is about building a positive workplace culture. What is a positive workplace culture? And then how to grow a healthy workplace culture. So what are the steps that you can take to reach that point? Week 3 is about leadership, the leadership component, and sharing out some best practices in leading a team on the farm, whether that be family members or employees or a combination of both, which is the case on many farms. And then we talk about strategic leadership and strategic direction, and thinking about, not just the tasks at hand today, but what are those long-term goals, and what are some of the strategies for the farm. And then week 4 is focused on people-centric systems. So the people-centric systems are where you're interacting with other employees, and that can be recruiting when you have a vacancy. It can be giving a performance review, managing conflict, dealing with, 2 employees that can't get along on whatever issue it is, and then developing employees, training, onboarding. We talked earlier about, the number of employees that are coming to farms without a farm background. How do you get them up to speed? How do you teach them what they need to know to be successful on your farm, and how to invest in that person so that they have the skills that they need and continue to grow and develop for you. I mentioned the weekly facilitated discussion groups. They're prompted by course activities. So during the course, you'll be asked discussion questions to be thinking about, so that you have things to share out during the weekly discussion groups. So how does it work? Groups or associations, hopefully like the DGA, can join as a cohort. They leverage kind of the shared learnings from each other. And then the group facilitator, which would be me, to kind of bring those questions out and encourage people to share openly with what's working well on their farm. UW-Madison will actually provide the login and password support. So basically, after you sign up for the class and pay your registration, you'll get a login so that you know how to access the course. And then if you're stuck on something, if a drop-down menu doesn't drop down, they provide tech support as well on that. And then the individual learners complete the weekly lessons on their own time and pace, as I mentioned. and then cohorts agree to a weekly discussion group. So that's basically how it works. It can be accessed through our Farm Management Topic Hub, which is our website where we house kind of all our resources, all the articles that we write, the fact sheets, and then various programs that we offer throughout the year. So that is BTech. I can certainly walk you through kind of what our topic hub looks like if you're interested. My email address is listed there on the screen. It's first name dot last name at wisc.edu. And then my business cell phone is listed there as well, 920-342-3180. I'm based in southern Wisconsin. I live in Walworth County. Jefferson County is actually my home office, but I'm in a statewide role and serve basically anybody who has questions or challenges that relate to HR and building a workplace culture. So with that, I'll pause and hopefully open things up for discussion.
Tim, I actually have a couple questions. So you are looking for some cohorts, hopefully some DGA folks. So what size of a cohort would you say is ideal?
Well, I can tell you that we're going to offer a special to DGA. So the cost for this class is $100 per participant, but we're offering the DGA a 20% discount, so $80 per student if they can come up with a cohort of 12. So that's kind of what we're looking for. 12 is not a magic number in any respect. It's just that I think 12 is a big enough group so that you have some rich dialogue and some discussion, but it's not such a big group that people feel intimidated about sharing or, you know, maybe kind of hang in the background because they think the group is too big. So yeah, a great question, Angie. We're hoping for a group of 12, and again, plus or minus, but that's kind of the way we've structured that special.
Perfect. So for any mentors, I know we have a few mentors on this call. So for this group, any mentors who are interested potentially in taking this course, feel free to send me an email and let me know. We are also going to be sending out through our internal website messaging system. We will be sending out an announcement and about the course and about the discounted price that they're going to be offering DGA mentors in the hopes that we can get that cohort of 12 who would be interested in this. So if you're interested, feel free to send me an email and we will get you on the list. Any other questions for Jim about anything that he covered today?
Jim, hi, this is Lucas Wainwright. I work in Pennsylvania. I want to say thanks, appreciate it. Especially like the way you phrased the safety. I don't forget the words exactly you use, but instead of just checking boxes and showing, you know, safety videos and stuff like that from an OSHA standpoint, I appreciate how you said that, and I'm going to steal a little bit of that if that's all right.
That's great.
And also the 3Ds are something that definitely, you know, are a challenge. When you talk about the dairy industry and the routine that, you know, all these that farmers have. I hope that, and I don't know in this course, or you're hoping maybe in the open dialogue that some of the ways that those are mitigated from like maybe from the dullness is what I was thinking, is like how do you engage people that are doing the same thing almost every single day consistently. Maybe some of that will come through. I don't know if you want to touch on any of that now. And lastly, I don't know how kosher this is, but Pennsylvania, the Center for Dairy Excellence in Pennsylvania I think was just approved an apprenticeship for dairy managers. I don't know how well you're connected out of state from an extension standpoint, or how kosher that is to reach across state lines and work with Pennsylvania, being not from extension of Pennsylvania, but might be worth touching base with some of them. This program might be a good offering. I don't know how fleshed out their full program is at this point.
Great.
Just
Yeah.
that's all I have.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you, Lucas. Yeah, I'll address a couple things there. So first of all, your comment about dull, dirty, and dangerous. One of the things that I think farm managers could do to try to address that is we have a tendency, when we have a vacancy on our farms, we have a tendency to fill the position at hand. So if you've got a milker spot missing, you go out and seek out a milker, which is fine. That's the job that you have. But what about the next job? What could a milker become? What could a milker aspire to be? Think about a career path on your farm, because what we're seeing is some significant generational differences where, the boomer generation was probably more comfortable, taking a job and working that job, in some cases 20, 30 years of working that same job. And what we're seeing with Gen X and Gen Z and millennials, they're not okay with that. They'll be a milker for a while, but then they want to know what's next. They want to know what the next opportunity is. And so one of the things I try to encourage farm managers to do is to, sell your prospective employee on the whole experience of what their career could look like on your farm, assuming good performance, obviously, rather than just hiring, in this case, a milker. And I'm not disparaging milkers at all. That wasn't the intent of that comment, but it is, on many farms, it's the entry level position, and in many cases, it's kind of your foot in the door. So something to be thinking now. And then, Lucas, your other point is a great one, and I'm so glad you brought it up. I am part of a multi-state extension group where we do share HR programming. So I know Cornell in New York State has a great program on supervisory leadership. I am familiar with the Penn State program that you mentioned. Iowa State has a good HR program. Theirs leans more towards financial management. Again, there aren't that many of us in extension that focus, exclusively on HR issues. So we definitely team up and tackle these multi-state. So thank you, Lucas. I appreciate your comments. Hi, Kathy.
Yeah, I'm sure pretty much all the farms here, we don't have, unless somebody's just milking part-time, they're not just a milker. We're small farms. So, somebody milks, they feed calves, they do this, they do that.
Mhm.
So it isn't, unless we want to move them up to taking over my son in my place, there's not all that. Well, you can move somebody up to be herds person. So
Right.
They're milking, but they're also doing cattle treatment. But I think it's a little different on our farms versus somebody that has 1,000 cows.
For sure. That's a great point, Kathy. I think for smaller operations, it is a little more challenging to have a career path, like if you think of a career path as promotions to additional responsibilities, that's hard to do because there may only be one or two leadership roles. But what I think smaller farms can do is emphasize the variety, because if people think, ooh, milking cows every single day, that sounds kind of boring. They may be intrigued by calf care or, just getting involved in some field work or the opportunity to operate some equipment around your farm. They may see that as the carrot versus just focusing on the one job. So I think for small farms, while it may not be a up the ladder career path, the variety that small farms can offer can be very exciting for people because it addresses that dull part of the D's pretty directly. So yeah, great point.
I guess I'd also have a question. I've never done performance reviews. My approach is, you know, we're not, my son and I aren't supervisors. We're working with everybody. So if we see something that wasn't done right, you know, we just coach them on, okay, this is how you do it. So I guess I'm not sure where the benefit of having a specific, okay, we got to sit down for an hour and talk over all these things. Is
Right.
that really helpful when we are engaging with them most every day?
Yeah, I think that the key for performance reviews is that you're sharing both the good and the bad. What I see sometimes on farms is when they have a performance interaction with an employee, it's almost always punitive. It's almost something that they've messed up. It's something that they've done wrong. And so then what happens is it damages that relationship that you as a leader have with the employee, because they think that every time you come to them with something to say, that they're going to get scolded, you know. So my point is, I don't think you have to be to the point of, you know, corporate America where they do performance reviews every January. You know, I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I think it's important to communicate with every employee positive things and negative things that are happening so that they don't associate a coaching with they're in trouble, you know, that they've done something wrong.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Great. Anyone else have any questions for Jim?
Hi, Jim. That was great. Enjoyed hearing what you had to say. It was informative. And you may have mentioned this. I had to take a call here a second ago, but can we get a copy of your PowerPoint?
Yeah, absolutely. I can share that with Angie, and she can send that out. And also, I early on, and hopefully people picked up on it, but the Farm Management Topic Hub. So if you search farms.extension.wisc.edu, or just type in UW-Madison or UW Extension Farm Management, our topic hub is where all my articles that I've written, all my fact sheets that I've developed, a lot of tips about compensation, how to do a job description, how to conduct a interview. All those types of articles that I've written are on there. They're all available for anyone who wants them. And so please use those and share them with your employees if that makes sense. Yeah, I'm happy to share those. And then my colleagues have a bunch of articles as well that aren't necessarily HR specific, but other aspects of farm management. So yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Jim, would you be willing to
Thanks.
type? Oh, sorry, John, go ahead.
Oh, I was just thanking you for that. And could you stick that link in the chat?
That's
Sure.
exactly what I was going to say.
I can do that.
That's
In
great.
fact, here's the landing page. So just so you know what it looks like. So when you arrive at Farm Management Topic Hub, you can see the topics. So ag land, pricing and contracts, financial, business development, policies and markets, HR, safety. So that's where you will arrive, I guess, so to speak. And then you can take it from there, and bear with me briefly, and I'll post that in the chat as well.
I did type it in there too. For some reason, my text is really big, but I did type it in there.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so just as kind of a heads up, and we will be making an announcement, obviously, through our DGA email blast, but we do have Jessica Matthews on with us today. And she has been hired as the new DGA apprenticeship manager. So at future monthly webinars, she will be moderating these and fielding questions. So watch for her on the June meeting. Jim, thank you so much for your time today. This was very informative, and we will start compiling a list of mentors who will potentially be interested in the employer of choice course. And we will be in touch. And I will send out the PowerPoint. Jim will send that to me, and I will send that out to everyone who's in attendance today. And if you have any additional questions after this webinar, feel free to get in touch with me and we'll get those answered for you.
Sounds great. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks so much. Everybody have a great day.
Have a great day, guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.